a couple dozen of you, more than that, asked for an email with some instructions on how to match the frequency that is generating itself in those long Saturday sits that Krista and I are doing for the months to come. I was expecting one or two people to have an interest. And so that threw me for the most delightful loop the last week and a half of reviewing all the many, many resources and approaches and instruction sets that are possible for opening doorways into the sort of non-dual realms. And at the same time, it made me listen a little bit better to what's really going on among us right now. And it really feels like since the last beginner series concluded, there has been a distinct shift in the energy. The sense of like a blooming of awareness and a lot of stillness showing up. It's not just me, right? And many of you who maybe haven't done so before are just finding yourselves in states of sort of luminosity and inner silence. There's something like very, very interesting happening. So the field is generating itself for factors that are mysterious. And that's the thing. Consciousness is a weather system. And this is why in Ashtanga method, we are so reticent to use the M word, the meditation word, because there's so much in the culture now that says that meditation is a thing you do, and it's a way that you discipline and train the mind. And that's great. That's amazing. The mind there's a zoo in there, and those animals do need some training, right? But we work with the mind by training it in the asana practice pretty strongly. That is a deep concentration practice if you actually do it, without fake drishti, without fake bandha, without just listening to your thoughts instead of listening to the breath, right? So that's a kind of mind training. But in this method, there's not a sense that you would go on and sit with that level of concentration. We say that the higher limbs, dhrana, dhyana, samadhi, they kind of can be caught. They can't be taught. And I do think that dhrana can be taught, but there's still this element of the catching of a weather system by just sort of being lucky to happen upon it, that it really helps us understand the respect for the nature of mind too. So if mind is like, or there's a tornado in there or a hurricane or something, you can't, with the will only, change consciousness. This basically, you just wait. We're not out there cloud zapping. There's a real reverence for consciousness itself and a knowledge that it's not always supposed to be in a state of stillness. It's just really nice when it is. So that said, that reticence is kind of hiding a really huge, giant, important secret, which is that the asana practice is 100% there as a preparation for that stillness to arrive, to, hopefully increase the chances that consciousness will present these states of clarity that happen when there's a stillness. And I think that happens through primarily that sustained commitment to concentration every meditation tradition that actually works starts the mind training with really solid concentration practice. So those of you who have sat a Goenka retreat know this. Those of you who've gone on a mindfulness retreat know this. There's a lot that just has to do with stabilizing the mind first. And so you've done that for 60 to 120 minutes in the asana practice, as well as working out the kinks in the body. You know, the adhesions and the pockets of emotional tension that we're encouraged to just see as the normal background condition of having a body are actually not present to the same degree for those of you who practice, and particularly right after practice. There's a kind of supplemental or a bonus energy that comes from letting go of the energy most of us waste most of the time holding on to tension, right? And that can be reinvested in consciousness itself. In any case, the thing that's happening especially a lot now after practice is sometimes like the state of silence or just ability to be makes itself very known. And so you naturally are, just because it's so sweet, drawn to being in that. So all of my research and all of my rereading of all of the, the dissertation that got written in the background this past week, those are just qualifiers for that sometimes comes. And actually spending time, what is time from that perspective in that state? What is state of consciousness from that perspective? Tends to change all the other experiences, right? Just those moments of oneness that the practice enables. So it feels like anything that I can do to support that without pushing anyone in to choosing to look for it, that's my job, right? So there's one resource of the many that's actually the most profound in this situation. And it's just the opening lines of the Yoga Sutras, right? So many of us have gone so deep into all of these books and all the esoteric knowledge and the cataloging of human suffering and awareness itself and the nature of the fallacy of the eye maker that is cataloged in the Yoga Sutras. But to be honest, the opening lines are the most profound for me. And so, to remind you, it's, now is yoga. Atta yoga nushasanam, yoga chitta vritti nirodha. I think that's like the weather system, right? Yoga is when the fluctuations in the consciousness, like, chill out. And it's something that happens, but also something that is always potentially there, right? There are always aspects of stillness, even in like the most intense weather that we might experience. There is always an eye in the storm. So then the next thing is tadadrashtu svarupe vastanam. And that's like, okay, so when the weather calms down, then the seer can rest in their true nature. And that, I think that's the best little trapdoor into that movement from the concentration that the asana practice creates into the thing that sometimes happens when you just sit. You just rest in your true nature. The fourth line, which I don't bring up very much, is vritti svarupyam itaratra, which is like, or this other thing can happen. If there's a lot of movement, it is the nature of mind to identify with the thoughts. It's the nature of mind to believe the thoughts. The very, like the kinetic energy itself of consciousness brings the true nature along for the ride, or at least like obscures the true nature, right? And so the sense of self is manufactured and goes along with whatever vrittis, whatever fluctuations the mind is taking us on, which is basically a description of most of our everyday life, right? So what Kristen and I are doing is basically a daily commitment to being in the non-dual state that can be trained with tons and tons of sitting practice. The cultivation of understanding within consciousness how the sense of self gets construed and constructed, and the spreading of the awareness to the parts of the mind that are increasingly illuminated when you sit, that would usually be subconscious. The definition of subconscious is just that it's below the nature or below the threshold of consciousness, right? So that does take training. And at the same time, that's just like a way of like building a door into the true nature, the still awareness that is unqualified, that doesn't really help to speak of after the practice. So I think because it's really contagious in the shala right now, you might just look for it. Cultivate the conditions under which it might catch and tell me what happens. So there is a lot to say. There are tons of resources for moving towards the right? And instead of dumping them on you, I will just say that I can be a sounding board for that kind of thing. There is a recorded class from many years ago that I wrote and gave, and then we have all the handouts and the recorded lectures from that, specifically to be an introduction to sitting after practice for people who had the interest. And that's slightly different from just resting in the true nature, because we worked a lot with like how to deal with the sense of self and the thinking mind if it comes up in the context of a sit. So there's a lot there that can build on this and support a new sitting practice. We can get all of that to any of you. Just ask. And a lot of people take themselves through that class once, maybe again a few years later, week by week, and use that to inform their sitting experience. In the meantime, this is something that's happening. It's going to keep happening. It's actually, if you end up wanting to come on Saturdays, virtually or in person, there is a sense of like a frequency that's generating itself. And you don't have to be local. Like, we're talking about like the true nature. We're talking about the background coming to the foreground, like the gestalt shift of that which makes thinking possible, the condition of the possibility of having a self, awareness itself becoming the foreground of the sit. So my God, you don't need to be at 220 South Main to have a sense of joining in that the awareness itself as the direct experience. Sometimes it just helps to know that there's a structure and a possibility to move into that space. So instead of sending you tons of instructions, I just want to note that you already know what to do, especially because you take Trishtana seriously. And there's something happening in this space already that is a manifestation of what happens after that. I think I'm going to have to say more later, but that's it for now.